So the question is asked quite a lot, can Scotland afford to be independent? Short answer, yes. Long answer, whisky. Scotland's whisky exports were worth 4.4 billion in the year 2018. Scotland exports 41 bottles of whisky per second. Scotch whisky is sold in more than 170 countries around the world, with the USA being the first £1 billion export. 30% of all Scotch whisky exports go to the EU. The whisky industry directly employs 10,000 people in Scotland. Renewable energy. It contributes 5.9 billion to the economy and creates over 21,000 jobs. Despite making up only 1% of the EU population, Scotland has 25% of EU wind power resources and 25% of Europe's tidal energy resources. Creative industries. Creative industries are worth £4.4 billion. Creative industries create 80,000 jobs in Scotland. And Rockstar, the famous company behind Grand Theft Auto, Red Dead Redemption, big selling games, are based in Scotland and are worth roughly about 3.5 billion. Food and drink. Scotland's food and drink industry is worth 14 billion, and that's doubled in the last 10 years. Education. 47% of Scots have college, university or a vocational qualification, which is 5% higher than the UK average and 16% higher than the EU average. The education in Scotland contributes about 11 billion to our economy, which is a rise of 82% over the last 5 years. Scotland's education industry employs about 50,000 people and supports almost 200,000 jobs. In the UK, private schools get an 80% discount on their tax because they do good or a charity. But next year in September, the Scottish Government plan to axe that benefit, and which would bring millions more back into the education system. Natural resources. Scotland is lucky in that, being a small nation, it has an enviable abundance of natural resources, doesn't it? This is Pan, by the way. Scotland provides 90% of the UK water, and actually Loch Ness has more water in it than the entirety of England and Wales put together. Scotland possesses 96% of the UK crude oil production, 63% of the natural gas production, 70% of UK fish landings. That's good, isn't it? You get lots of fish. 60% of UK timber production, 90% of UK hydropower energy, and with only 32% of the UK land mass, we own over 60% of the maritime area. Not to mention, thriving tourist industry that's worth over £4 billion. Glasgow builds more satellites than any other EU city. Chemical sciences and industrial biotech exports almost £4 billion. Scotland's oil and gas industry was estimated to be around 17.5 billion a couple of years ago. And the textile industry is set to reach its target of £500 million worth of exports by next year in 2020. So Scotland can easily survive. There's plenty of other independent countries with far less resources, far less industry, and they get on quite fine.